Hi, this is Dr. Carl Goldkamp. If you're interested in learning about the ketogenic diet like I was, to save my own life, then this is probably the podcast for you. 8 years ago, I knew nothing about it. 6 years ago, it saved my life. 3 years ago, I started researching and talking with some of the authorities in the field and attending medical conferences about this to understand why and how keto so dramatically changed my and my wife's Judy's lives. The purpose of this podcast is to share our journey of discoveries with you in understanding how keto is so effective in improving so many different conditions, from obesity, epilepsy, diabetes, infertility, MS, Alzheimer's, heart disease, to name a few. So take a step away from all the hype you've probably heard and roll up your sleeves with me and join me weekly to explore this living miracle that anyone can access. We'll talk science, we'll talk food. We'll explore its history and evolution to today, which is that the sheer wonder of the ketogenic way of eating has changed untold number of lives, unlike anything before it. And in case I forget to mention it, please join our Facebook group, Keto Naturopath. Hi, this is Dr. Carl Goldkamp, and welcome back to the next episode of the Keto Naturopath. Today, I'd like to go over something that's probably been talked about a lot, and it is an issue. It's part of a bigger issue, but I'm calling it cracking the code to a keto or carnivore weight loss stall, or really any weight loss stall, and I'll break it down to components. You know, our journey from saving our lives roughly 8 or 9 years ago it wasn't like I'm looking around for some sort of like special little plan to get better by. We needed help and we couldn't find help. And it was pretty obvious that medicine really wasn't going to come to the rescue. And it was pretty obvious there wasn't any intention. I mean, nobody was trying to murder us, but other than Judy's neurosurgeon, who was incredibly insightful and helpful, my docs weren't. You know, they wanted to take out more of my small intestine, large intestine. I mean, they would just keep doing it. And they kept them employed. There really wasn't a lot of compassion there and giving them medications and the drugs for this, that, or the other thing. By the way, nobody ever did any surgery on me. So in case you get the wrong impression. So from that, it's, you know, what do we need to do? I thought I had it all squared away. I had my own practice and so on and so forth. So the point of that is at some point in your life, you're going to figure out that you are on your own. And at some point, you have to boil it down to what you really believe is true. So you go to a person or you read something, and the question you have to ask yourself, do you think this is mostly true, all true, partially true? Can you trust the source? Can you get in touch with the source? I couldn't do that with most of my doctors. So I was so ill, it clearly passed out of naturopathic hands. They had no ability to help me there other than, oh, if you tried this probiotic, let's get over it. And for me, that was kind of a healthy distancing from perhaps my blind loyalty to certain tenets of naturopathic marketing, I'll call it. I love the tenets of naturopathic medicine, but the tenets of the marketing of, hey, it's this supplement or that supplement. And I really didn't get very deep with me. And so I had to figure it out for myself. So from that, we developed into pre-keto, before keto conferences are out there, going forward with it, some tests on ourselves, going forward, elaborating on keto. It still was hyper simplistic for me. And the answers I was seeing at some of the conferences were I was always surprised how uneducated they seemed. And on the other side, seemed hyper complicated in understanding the metabolic aspect that all of keto is helping to support. And so it was on both sides, highly complicated, nothing that I could really use to treat myself to get better. It's nice that that information was there and intellectually, you know, heavy, thick, however you want to say it. On the other side, it was, what do these guys do for their own health? Half of them didn't seem that healthy. Some did, very much so. Okay, so this is cracking the codes. What do we mean by that? Well, you know, most people come to being heavy and they don't know how they got there. And, you know, we know there's an obesity epidemic. We know there's a lot of epidemics out there, but clearly we are a heavy country. The West has become very heavy. Why is that? That's a new thing, relatively speaking. 50 or 70 years is a new thing. And it was done to us. It wasn't that we all sort of collectively decided to be irresponsible and just sit on the sofa and eating bonbons or potato chips or whatever and having 14 bowls of Captain Crunch or whatever. No, I think that our food supply changed, and we are as a direct result of that. So we'll call that processed foods, and we know what that is. But I've been saying this to patients for so long, and some listen, some don't. But now it comes down to this specifically. I find that we've been underproteined, we've been overindulged in certainly the omega oils, the seed oils, and we don't work out. And it all goes together. So let's get into what it takes. And so what I consider how people got here is they were heavy. They looked for a solution. They went to keto and then to carnivore, and now they've heard of protein-sparing modified fast, don't understand what it is. They ask the obvious, how can it be a fast? It has to do with protein. Well, hence the word is protein-sparing. Modified fast, modified is redundant, and it basically means to take protein. So that's a simple understanding. Well, from that, let's start with the protein. I learned what is required for protein. What is the actual amount? Read a lot of books and so on and so forth. I think there's a number of physiologists, mostly in Canada, that Stuart Phillips, is brilliant, and he has a whole department out of Hamilton and a few others, and one in the UK, and they've really gone deep into what is required through the lifetime, how best to have whole food sources of protein throughout the day. There actually is a thing called muscle protein synthesis. So that's a variable as well. So that has to be taken into account. And you can drive that demand in part by exercise, of course. That makes some common sense. So let's get into it. All right. So from that, people go, all right, I've been through these things. Everything's like a special little club. But no, I don't think that the protein-sparing modified fast is really a gimmick. I don't think it's a 1 month thing. We do it as a lifestyle, pretty much. I think it really refers to what is considered an ancestral diet. An ancestral diet, and I was reminded of this a couple of weeks ago when one of our neighbors brought us some venison, both of sausages venison and the steaks venison, and of the ground meat. I guess, can you call it hamburger if it's from a deer? And so we had that, and I realized, wow, this is actually really pretty lean. This is like ultra lean meat. Well, that's what game was. And so back in the days of hunter-gatherers, which we really, up until 10,000 years ago, we were all about hunter-gatherers. And people could say, well, we were hunter-gatherers after that as well. Some of us were and some of us weren't. But we evolved on a hunter-gatherer digestive system, on a hunter-gatherer metabolism. And so what we gathered was very lean meat. We never had extra fat. It was very valuable. So you think of the Eskimos, they're all about fat and the protein, and obviously no veggies. And so that does work, but that's what we kind of grew up on. That's what we evolved on. We're talking about over hundreds of thousands of years. Ideally, modern man came in around 220,000 years ago. So since then, we came forward with eating pretty much the same thing up until about 10,000 years ago. And then the big animals are gone, and we went after the smaller animals. So that reminded me that venison that we got was protein-sparing, modified fast, whole food source of protein, which I always advocate for. And it made me realize, like, well, that's in essence what we're doing. We're telling people not to eat fat sources of meat or chicken or fish, but to lean that down. And the initial intent was to help people lose weight, but really it's bringing it down to an ancestral truth, which is everything we ate was lean. There really is no such thing as fat fish. We call it fatty fish relative to fish in general. So salmon is a fattier fish. You might even say cod's a fattier fish. And sable, that's called something else. These northern cold water fish, which have to have a thicker fat. They're not like sea lions or walruses or any of that. Those are mammals that are fat mammals. But the fish aren't really that much fatter, relatively speaking. So they had lean everything, unless you lived in the poles, in the Arctics and the Antarctic. Okay, So that was a truth I realized this is actually not so much a diet. This is going back to how we ate. The question then remains, well, how much fat do you need? And do you need veggies, right? Okay, so going forward, so in the PSMF, which is what I'm going to call it, the core aspect of that is, you calculate your amount of protein that you require per day, which is your ideal body weight. You can Google that term, and it's not about you weighing that. It's simply using that number as a reference for how much protein you're going to need per day. So I'm 5'10 plus. So my ideal body weight, which is not what I weigh, is 162 pounds. So I take that, and it's just, it's a loose number. This isn't rocket science. So it's 162 pounds, and it's 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So I have 162 grams of protein I should have per day. Okay, the idea then is I got that, check that. Now, if I could break that up into, doesn't even have to be 4 equal servings, but if I ate it 4 different times, and at no one time did I have less than the minimal amount of protein required to stimulate the greatest muscle protein synthesis. So the minimum amount needed to give me the maximum kick. So to eat more than the minimum amount is not going to give me a greater response. It's just eating more food. So when people say, I'll eat all my protein at one time, that is kind of a waste because only the minimal amount is going to be used at that time. It's not like you can park it to the side and you're going to come back later. So that's why you need to spread it out over the day. Ideally, if you are an Olympic athlete, you're a weightlifter or a bodybuilder, and your whole musculature is what your life runs on, and you want it to be peak, you make it into 5. So in essence, you take your amount that you calculated on your ideal body weight, you divide it by 5, that's roughly 20%. And if you had that spread out over the whole day of 5 eating times, you'd be able, just on eating protein alone, you would be maximizing your muscle protein synthesis. Now, you could increase the demand up that muscle protein synthesis by working out. And you could up that by doing the best exercises for stimulating your MPS, which is slow high intensity, weight resistant workout. Okay, so you got your amount you need per day, you divide it by 3 or 4, at least 3 times a day you would be eating, at least spread it out over the day. Do not have it. So this is not, you're not doing intermittent fasting. You're not doing time restricted eating. That does not apply. And by the way, if those are interested in going into greater details, I did a whole video on that and comparing the two. So you can see in graphs why you wouldn't do that. Okay, so now I want you to use whole food sources of protein only. There again, these are basic rules. Just use food. Don't go, I'm going to go get the best whey protein concentrate, and that's what I'm going to use for my muscle protein synthesis. Why not? Don't do that. Why not eat like your ancestors ate? Your parents, your grandparents, times 1,000 generations before. Do what they did and get healthy as they were. Okay? Don't be looking for a hack. Just do the work for a month and you'll stay out of trouble and you'll get this done. And after that, the question does become with PSMF, it's like, well, if I'm being fat lean, the idea of using whole foods, by the way, it keeps you out of trouble. So basically you could do it the whole time, 7 days a week if you wanted to, because you're getting your fat sources with the things you're eating. You're eating the fish, the chicken, the poultry, the meat, and various different variations of that. Try not to have the same kind of thing. Don't always be turkey. Don't always be chicken. Don't always be sirloin. Don't always be, ribeye with the fat trimmed. Move it around. Okay, so the only thing you're missing, though, if you're going to work liver in there, is liver and egg yolks, and you will have a complete nutrition. Liver and egg yolks. So you'll notice I didn't say anything about carbohydrates or having dark green leafy vegetables, which I did tell all my patients to have for nearly the first 2 decades of my practice. Now I don't believe that at all. I believe that you do need liver and you do need egg yolks. And so it's a wicked simple diet, as they say, once you get this down. It's an ancestral diet for sure. Okay, so now you have those things down. and you have the idea you're going to exercise. I'm going to call this HIIT. So when I say slow weight resistance, right? Slow weight resistance, high intensity training. This is otherwise known as HIT, high intensity training, weight resistance. Go to the gym twice a week. You could do it in 15 minutes twice a week. Judy and I do each other, so to say, spot each other, watch each other. And so it takes us an hour to do our exercises, and we make sure we go slow. So the idea of slow is a big deal. We count 10 out, 10 back, 10 out, 10 back. And when it's going too fast, we say you're going too fast. It's really hard. So we've been doing that. That's made a substantial difference. As much as we thought we were doing it correctly 2 years ago, it got better. Okay. The level I'd like to add is what I call the omega factor, is becoming a clean burning incinerator. What does that mean? That means with the whole food sources of meat, you're going to burn off your excess, and I'm sure you have excess omega-6. And this has been this excess omega-6, which you can measure, and I want you to go get lab tested and get it measured. So we all know we're all high. I've not met anybody who's with the ratio of 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 of omega-6 to 3. So that doesn't exist that I've seen. Most people are high, very high. So let's stop the source of that, which is processed foods, which is the seed oils, which is the nut butters, which is the nuts. So for a month, just your first month, I'm going to ask you to give all those things up. Then you can think about nuts later, but we didn't even do nuts for keto because of the carbs. You choose. That's your thing. In terms of nut butters, we use one in a recipe, sunflower seed butters, because it gives a good texture to a certain muffin, but it's a little bit. So you have some discretion. But initially, let's shut down the sources of omega-6 completely. All right? Completely. Do it. So go get tested. Step 2 is shut down all your sources of omega-6. You're going to get some, by the way, through your all your meat sources. But if you shut your exogenous sources down, it'll be a big difference. And then I would also say, given if you're like me, we're buying our meat and chicken at a grocery store. We don't have a special farmer or special chickens yet. That'd be nice. That's somebody's dream, our dream. Those are going to be slightly high, not really high, but relative to all the other protein, whole food sources or protein sources, they're going to be higher in omega-6. So I'm saying, why don't you back off on the chicken and pork aspects of your diet for the first month? Have it once a week or less, or just don't have it at all for that 4 weeks. That will be a good way to set you up to burn off your omega-6. And what you're going to be finding, this whole omega-6 in you, because now you know it's in you, just get your number and make a little spreadsheet of all those, it's a whole little panel of 4 or 5 things. It's not expensive. What you're going to find is for all of us who have had fairly elevated omega-6, it's really like driving with your brakes on, whether it's the handbrake or the foot brake. It just is this heaviness that you always have. And when you find you burn it off, suddenly you gain this lightness and the speed and ability for you to lose fat, not weight so much, well, weight, of course, but fat is amazing. You've removed the obstruction to you being able to lose fat. So, when people say, I've done everything and I can't lose fat. Well, this is one of the big reasons that's never been addressed, because people they go, I know I shouldn't have seed oils. Well, why don't you measure it, find out what the sources are, and not do those sources for a month? This is the difference. This isn't the same old story. This is get tested, identify, remove those sources, move on, and discover the lightness of life. Discover it. It's like, wow, look what's going to happen. I kid you not. Okay, now we go on from there. And that'd be great. If you want to add in, you get into HIT, that would be great. Now you've driven up your demand for MPS. And by the way, if you're over 40, definitely, probably over 20 now, since of the obesity epidemic, is that it's difficult as we get older it becomes more difficult to build muscle. So you need to stimulate a little more, and you need to have a little more protein as you get older. These are studies. This has been done. So it isn't just Dr. Goldkamp telling you what he thinks. This is out there. Thanks to primarily my understanding of all that came from Dr. Stu Phillips up in Canada, Hamilton University, who's a physiologist, and it really has us down. I appreciate his work a lot. So the last thing is like, what do we use for supplements? Really none. But I do use some electrolytes, and I use it in this way, not in the way you're thinking about. There's now people got into electrolytes. I use primarily magnesium because magnesium we've always been deficient in collectively as a human race, at least in the United States, given all the food we've been eating. And so I usually have magnesium, potassium aspartate, and calcium, magnesium, and then magnesium glycinate, malate. And those are my sources. And I just sort of mix it up sometimes. I do have some essential fatty acids, DHA, EPA, daily, just 2, nothing big. I think it's a big deal. I wouldn't do that until you got your month behind you, by the way, because we're trying to burn off that omega-6. You're going to screw up your ratio if you start having your omega-3. It's going to give you a reading that's going to look better than it is. We're trying to get rid of your excess omega-6. And by the way, this isn't just me, Dr. Goldkamp, saying that. That's me testing a lot of people and learning from people like Dr. Artemis Sinopoulos. Look her up. I mean, I'll put her in the show notes. Okay, and after that, so now we had the ideal body weight. We broke it up into 3 or 4 servings a day. What we have a after workout, about 8:30, we have some protein. It's not a protein shake. It's usually last night's leftovers, some sirloin, some fish, some Judy's turkey burger sausages. You grab them and have that, then late morning, then early afternoon. So that's already 3 sessions, 3 different times. We've had something to eat of a minimum. So for me, it would be a minimum of 30 grams of protein. For her, it's probably about 20. I have to look it up, but hers is certainly a lot less. And then we have a sit-down dinner around 5:30. So that's how our day works. And it's been transformative. And the protein part has been transformative. So this whole idea of protein and protein first, that's not my idea. This goes back 30 years ago. And it rises and falls and rises and falls. But I think that putting it in the context of PSMF, it's really an ancestral diet orientation of lean, whole food sources of protein. Okay, so we go on. And if you're interested, go onto YouTube. You'll see some of these references. And what I've done is I made this amalgamation of a video in which I pulled in the references I've done before. Like, for instance, when people ask about intermittent fasting versus eating 4 times a day, I said they are mutually oppositional. When you do intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating, that's because you're a carb eater. Since we're not eating carbs, it's irrelevant to us. In fact, we have to eat 3 or 4 times a day for that MPS, muscle protein synthesis. And we go and talk about that fairly frequently. You can get real sophisticated if you want to and wear a CGM or measure your glucose numbers and your ketone numbers. And I used to do that a lot, and I haven't done it recently. The CGM is nice to see, but I've done all my little tests and so on. I kind of know the answers to them now, on me anyway, but I like to see it on other people because that sort of feedback for them changes their behavior, at least in what they eat. And once they see how this works, it's a small miracle. So I think this biofeedback, which is what a continual glucose monitor is, and we're just talking about the Freestyle Libre, so it's one that's not highly exact, and the really good ones cost about $600 or $700. That's Dexcom, and you have to pay for the cartridges and so on. It's just great feedback on your blood sugar, and you get to see what does protein do, what does carbs do, and everything else, other things, and what happens when you work out. These are good things to know. So I talk about sarcopenia as we get older because everybody heads down that same path. We all get older. We all have a progressively more and more difficult time to create muscle mass. We all have a more and more difficult time to get the amount of protein that we need in our diet. So we have to be aware of those 2 things. And then, so we have to really be a little more conscious of working out than we were when we were younger. We had a lot of freebies when we were younger. It's a real thing. And there's a lot of studies behind this. And scooting through my notes here, there was NPR did a couple of pieces back in 2019 and 2020 on processed foods. And it's, over the last 70 years, ultra-processed foods have come to dominate the U.S. diet. Do you think? And that's no coincidence. And in that, I think the biggest part of that, besides it being engineered foods to taste great, is the high omega-6, the high linoleic acid that's in processed food that is, going through life with the brakes on. That makes us get heavier and heavier and makes it even more difficult to lose that fat. We are fat hanging trees because of linoleic acid, in my view. So this has been a big deal. It's really started about 100 years ago, but really arced up in the 70s. And so for what we do for our on days and our off days is that, we have really the only thing that we're conscious of on our on days, and for me, it becomes a blur at this point. We're pretty low fat. There again, we get all the fat from our proteins. On the off days is when I have her Judy's egg yolk waffles, or do egg yolk wraps. That's when I come and have my egg yolks. There's plenty of nutrition in the egg yolks, and egg yolks, yes, they're high in omega-6. So if you hold the omega-6 for a couple days, like on your weekends or whenever you want to put those off days on, that's a good time to have it. You do need omega-6. I'm not saying you don't need omega-6. You need a little. It's a little bit like vitamin A. You need a little vitamin A. You take more vitamin A, it becomes toxic. So people who are deficient in vitamin A, they have an immune problem, and they actually are immune vulnerable. So they get some vitamin A, and it's remarkable. Their immune system just snaps to, and they're a healthier person. If they continue having vitamin A, they become toxic, and guess what? Their immune system actually starts getting suppressed from too much vitamin A. So it's like that pretty much with anything. It's a curve. So yes, we need a little. When you have too much, which is what has happened over the last 70 years through the processed foods, primarily the seed oils and the nut butters, that this is what has happened. I believe this is the core of our obesity epidemic. Absolutely. So undoing that, but the good news is this is very easy to undo. You get measured, you see the numbers, you find your sources, you can go on to a free app, Chronometer, and do that, and then you address them, and suddenly you are this different person. So to me, that's amazing. So the problem I had with the omega-6, the omega-3 issue before, it never led to anything that you could either measure or then do something about it. It always said, hey, we're too heavy in omega-6, cut back on your sources. Well, how do people know what their sources are? They can say, okay, well, I won't cook in soybean oil anymore. All right, that was a source. If you were doing that, that's probably a big change. But all the other things, for them, they need to find out what their sources are. Was it really the pork? I doubt it. I think that would be a component, but it won't be the biggest component. It will be those Doritos that they love to have, or something else. Some of the questions that come up are, how do I consume so much protein? Well, they're actually not consuming that much protein. When people feel this is too much protein, what they've revealed that they're still eating their carbs and they've added their protein to it, and then it's very heavy. It's too much to eat. If they are doing the PSMF, as I've described it, and they're having whole food sources of protein, then that's not a problem. So I can tell that's their giveaway. They go, no, I don't do any carbs. They are doing carbs, and that's what happens. So when people say protein spikes your blood glucose, yeah, it spikes your blood glucose only if you are already having carbohydrates at that specific time, in that specific meal. And then you bring in the protein, it's going to make your glucose go up even higher. If you're not having any carbs and you just have your bacon and you just have your sirloin steak or whatever it is, not much, not very high at all. So that's what you have to think about. So these partial truths, they're tossed around to make you feel badly about it. And they'll say, well, how do we sustain the world? That's a whole different argument. I don't buy that one either. But anyway, back to these frequently asked questions and comments. I don't weigh the ideal body weight you refer to. Is this a problem? No, it's not a problem. As I say, if you weigh half that or if you weigh 4 times that, it really doesn't matter. We're using the ideal body weight as a number to calculate your daily required amount of protein. Next question would be, what if I never did keto or carnivore and I'm just starting now? Well, you'd probably have to go a little more slowly because keto or carnivore people have already fat transitioned themselves, and they probably did that over the better part of 3 to 6 to 9 months. It's an ongoing process to metabolically adapt yourself to burning fat. So they are ahead, and it's hard just to jump in from a standard American diet, which is high fat and high carbs, to suddenly go to a whole food sources of protein. So you'd have to go in baby steps, very slowly. Lower your expectations for the short term, increase your expectations for the long term. I noticed my ketones decrease and my glucose increased. What's up with that? Well, that is a transition, but then it usually equalizes in time. So it happens for 30 days, sometimes even longer, that you get not high, but if you've been keto or carnivore and you've been measuring your ketones and you're in your 80s, you're in 1 to 5, and you start your PSMF and you go, wait a minute, I can hardly even get to 1 anymore. Well, that's basically a transition. And I wouldn't worry too much about it because you'll find your ketones will go down, your glucose will go up. Your glucose that might have been as an average in the 80s, that'd be nice, and you went on to PSMF, it might come up into the high 90s or even low 100s, but it then will creep back down. And it's your muscles transitioning to, again, just being fat primarily. Because glucose, protein does go to the liver and can make glucose, gluconeogenesis. And it's interesting, what I learned about really diving deep into cats' metabolisms, because they are obligate carnivores and dogs are not obligate carnivores, nor are bears, for instance, but cats are. So cats have 11 essential amino acids. We have 8, arguably 9. But so they eat protein for their whole diet, and the vet thinks, well, they get some carbs because in the days of being wild animals, they ate the guts of the things they killed, so they got some secondhand carbohydrates. Maybe. Interesting story. But for the most part, if they just ate whole food sources of protein, which is what they do, that they get enough blood sugar from the protein going to the liver to be made into glucose. So it serves both ways. It's a good source of a little bit of glucose, not much, and it's a good source of protein, obviously. Okay, do you do continuous days on or alternate days off? For instance, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday on days on, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday on days off. We do straight 4 or 5 days. As I say, right now is pretty much a lifestyle. I just remember to eat the egg yolks enough at least once a week, and I'll have some waffles there, and that's fine. But I've heard other people like to do it the other way, alternating days, and it's entirely up to them. I don't have any firsthand experience saying one is more efficient than the other, but just doing it over time and doing it as how I have outlined it and backing away from some of those omega-6 things, you'll find that you have taken the brakes off. And one page I did leave out is that we have a whole list of videos that you might want to follow, which Judy's done, of all the things we make. So make it fun. You don't have to feel you're imprisoned on a PSMF. So we have a playlist on there. It's called How We Make What We Love to Eat on Our Protein-Sparing Modified Fast, from the breads to various things, and it's ongoing. This has been our objective, is to get this point across, because we had to save ourselves and nobody could save us. You know, I was I was the speaker of the class for my graduating class, so I was no dummy, but yet there was very few people, really nobody, that could help me. I had gone beyond their minimum ability to help a severely ill person. And that was me, and certainly was my wife as well. So with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope you had enough of a sequential amount of directions to get you on your way to PSMF, and doing it in a whole food source of protein, and take care of your omega-6s. Till next time. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Dr. Goldkamp again for a brief reminder of something I completely forget to do at the end of every episode. You've heard me talk long enough in many different episodes, but what I would love you to do, and many of you have already done this, I just want to reinforce this particular behavior, which is to send me your questions. Send me your questions and anything you have about keto. If there's something that I don't know, I will look it up. And if it's something that intrigues me, I will probably make an episode a podcast about that particular topic. So what you need to do is to send me your questions at drgoldkamp@ketonaturopath.com. So that's DRGOLDKAMP at KETONATUROPATH.com. Dr. Goldkamp@ketonaturopath.com. Feel free to join our Facebook group, which is also ketonaturopath.com. That's been growing lately. You also have to answer a questionnaire should you choose to join. And I don't ask for your email. I ask that you follow our terms. I try to avoid advertising and the obvious interruptions of just a good Facebook group. So, hope to see you at one place or other. Please send me your questions and look forward to talking to you and getting to know you. Take care.